Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. Melissa Foote has totally remade her life. She left a successful teaching career to start her own business in a totally unrelated field, and she's never looked back. Join us for a conversation about change, getting out of your comfort zone, and most of all, about finding peace and success in life. Melissa, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Hi, Pat. Thanks for having me. I'm incredibly inspired by the stories you share on your podcast, and I can't wait to read your book, so I'm very honored to be here. My bump in the road actually happened when I turned 40. However, I feel like a lot of parts of my story happened a little bit before then, and I almost didn't even realize it until I hit my bump in the road. So I'm going to just backtrack a little bit and tell you a little bit about my life as an adult. I graduated from college when I was 22, and I got my first teaching job. I was a classroom teacher, and I was so young and excited, and I thought I'd conquer the world. I got a job in this little tiny school where there were only about 200 kids. So we were like our own little family, and I really loved teaching. I worked, 60 hours a week those first few years, and I came across a lot of very seasoned teachers who weren't as ambitious or excited. And I think in that I learned some lessons, again, that I didn't realize till later when I went through my bump in the road. But I just kind of swore to myself I'd never be someone who settles in a job where I'm not being fulfilled. I think so many of us, especially as women, we get jobs in a field or we're doing something we think we're supposed to be doing, and we just kind of let life go by, and maybe it doesn't feed our soul or doesn't inspire us as much as it did in the beginning, but we often stay safe in our little bubble. And so we just keep going along. And a lot of times I think, especially in the teaching world, people will teach, 10, 20 years past that moment where they feel inspired anymore. And I think that it's one of those lessons that it's a hard lesson to learn because you have to take some risks, but I don't think settling in a job is what is really our, grand purpose in life. So anyway, fast forward a few years, I got married. We started our family. I had my first son. And I loved being a mom. I still kept teaching. I actually went back to school and got my master's during that time. And I really ran on empty. I just, would get up, do the mom thing, go to school, work all day, and then go to school to be a student at night and on the weekends. And it wasn't necessarily a challenging time in my life, but it definitely was where I was running on empty. And I don't know if people can relate to that, where you're just trying to do all of the things and often for other people, and you kind of forget about yourself. And I really let self-care go during that season of my life because I was just on autopilot, trying to just almost survive and get through each day. And so a few years later, we decided we were going to grow our little family, and I ended up finding out I was pregnant with twins. And we don't have twins in our family, so it was an absolute shock to us. And they were born a couple months early, so we, had a NICU stay, and they were pretty sick little babies. They were born in November, and so it's just, RSV season. And where I already thought I was on empty, now I was really on empty because I still was working. And luckily I wasn't in school anymore, but just trying to have, 3 little kids, 2 of them, which were really sick, and trying to work was a lot. And I don't think I was very reflective in that season of my life or very intentional about taking care of myself, because I think as we do as women, we just, start our families, and then our whole life maybe revolves around family life, and we forget to take care of ourselves. And so, 10 years went by, and I think I was just on autopilot, living my life. It was like Groundhog Day every day. I'd get up, I'd make my kids lunch, I'd put something in the crock pot for dinner. I'd take them all to school. I'd go work all day. I'd go pick everybody up. We'd go to practices or, band concerts, whatever we had going on that night, come home, make dinner, put the kids to bed. And then I would work until 10, 11, 12 at night, just grading papers, making plans. And 10 years of that was a lot. And I think I know a lot of women who are either in this season or already went through this season where you just are constantly on the go, taking care of people, kind of letting your life pass you by. And then I turned 40 and I had a huge challenge, a very unexpected challenge come up in my life and my marriage. And it was definitely my bump in the road. I wasn't prepared for what was coming. I felt kind of blindsided, and I don't want to glaze over the fact that it was definitely the hardest season of my life, but I just had this kind of peace inside of myself. And I was able to look back at all of the other hard seasons I've been through. And I also knew I didn't want to let this event in my life crush me. I had so much more I wanted to do, and I didn't want to spiral. And so I really, in that moment, decided that, we're going to get through this. We're going to work hard. And we did a lot of hard work. I feel like it was, in some ways, people have like a midlife crisis. I felt like it was my midlife, more of like an awakening. It really made me wake up to the 10 years, 15 years I'd just been getting up and going, doing, the monotonous day in, day out. And not to discount, I was very blessed. I loved my life. We had a great house. We have 3 boys. I really did love teaching. And so everything was great. It wasn't like anything bad was happening, but it really woke me up at 40 to make me realize, is this what I want to do for the next 10 years of my life, and let my life just pass me by? And so I got very intentional. I started journaling, meditating a little bit, things I should have been doing all along to take care of myself. I had the opportunity to go to a women's business conference, and I went all by myself, which after, raising a family, I never did anything by myself. Sometimes I wasn't able to go to the bathroom by myself. And so going on this trip by myself was such a big deal. And so I flew to South Carolina, and I was in the midst of all these amazing women who basically chased their dreams. And it was just like the perfect timing. And in the moment, education had changed for me a little bit. I was becoming one of those teachers I swore I'd never become. I love my students, but there was such a focus on testing and statistics and research and reading books and so many things that weren't even about showing up for my kids in my classroom. And so I realized I think I needed to get out of education. And so after 18 years, I decided I was going to quit my job and start my own business. And now I get to teach adults, and I teach tech classes in retirement communities and libraries. And so I'm still able to use my passion for teaching. And I just was able to find a different way to use those, passions that I have in my career. And I also ended up training for a marathon. It had been on my bucket list my whole life. I'm a bit of a runner. I've never done anything that intense, but I trained and ran a marathon. I kind of just started checking things off my list I knew I always wanted to do. And I just had realized I didn't take care of myself and put myself as a priority my whole life as soon as, I started my job and had kids. And not because anybody demanded that of me. It just happened. And so I did a triathlon. I think quitting my job was probably one of the biggest things. A lot of people thought I was crazy. I was just a few years out from being in my 20-year mark as a teacher, but I couldn't even do 2 more years. It just wasn't in me anymore. And, I left a stable salary, a stable job, retirement. But I think sometimes there's moments in life where you just have to call it quits, even if you're so close to something or if things are comfortable, in order to follow your passion or take risks or be inspired a little bit more. And so I absolutely love my new job, and my business is amazing. It's been probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. But I also attribute being brave enough and waking up to my life from my bump in the road at 40 to really make me start living. And so I just turned 45, and I can tell you the last 5 years of my life have been some of the most fruitful, some of the most inspiring. I'm surrounded by amazing women in business who I feel like we're always cheering each other on. And, I was always surrounded by women in my teaching career in the classroom, especially elementary school. It's almost all women. But I feel like in that system, it's almost set up to pit women against each other. We're comparing test scores and comparing who's doing better at this, that, and the other. And so it's been a really amazing journey to come across new groups of women where I feel like we're truly cheering each other on, always trying to make connections. How can I share your business? And I'm so grateful for that, because it definitely is a huge benefit of having my own business. I still work 60 hours a week like I did in my first few years of teaching, but I'm very passionate about it. And I feel like I have purpose. I get to teach, in these retirement communities, a lot of people who still want to learn new things. They didn't grow up with technology. And so I come in and, they want to be there and they're so excited. And I feel like my 18 years as a teacher was meant to be so that I could be a better teacher in this season of my life. And I'm more intentional in my family life. My husband and our oldest son just went to college actually in Arizona. And so we're so much more intentional in our day-to-day life. And I think it took that, event at 40 for me to realize it. And I'm so grateful it happened at 40 and not at 60 or 80. And I'm actually even grateful it happened, because I don't think that my life would be what it is today. So I'm excited to share my story, in whatever way I can, even if it's to motivate someone who feels like they're stuck in their job, or even if it's to, I have a lot of younger friends who are raising little kids. And so even if it's to encourage them to take care of themselves right now in this season of life, because I think that's so important. And it's just, we're so exhausted in those stages of life that we forget to take care of ourselves. And I just sometimes wonder what it would have been like if I would have been a little more aware back then. But I also am grateful. I think all of this was meant to be as part of my journey and has gotten to me where I am today. And even I'm very aware that I will hit more bumps in the road, as all of your podcasts is always sharing stories of people. It's not like anybody just hits one, right? And so we're always hitting them. And I think the resiliency you build in learning whatever lessons you're meant to learn are just priceless, and almost taking those with you into the next bump. And so I've lost 2 friends in the last year who are my age. And so, just being inspired even by them, I almost feel like the things they would have done if they had more time. And so I'm very aware every day when I wake up, I'm very grateful that I get today and that I'm healthy and that my husband and my kids are amazing. And I try to just live a little bit more intentionally every day than I ever would have before. So
I want to go back to that women's conference in South Carolina. What was it about that conference that really sent you off on a different trajectory?
So I think it was in the midst of my very challenging season, and I was just trying to find my way. And I went to this conference. I think I already had a little bit of an idea that I wanted to potentially start my own business. And I didn't overthink it. I just said yes, and I went to it. And so getting there, it was in an auditorium, and there were thousands of women, and the energy in that room, and then all of the people who were able to share stories of what their businesses were, and everybody that I came across, we ended up, meeting for lunch or dinner with people you met along the way. Everybody actually had some version of a bump in the road. And that was what, made their decision to do something different in a career. And so it was almost like all of those people were very strategically placed in my life to just encourage me and inspire me that I could do this too. I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs at all. My parents are amazing. I'm very close with them, and they have always worked so hard. And they've always worked for, my mom's a nurse. My dad was always working in IT. So I think I was raised just to work hard. You have to work hard, and then you can enjoy your life and do what you want, but you have to work hard. And so being in a room full of women who kind of broke out of their molds to start a business and take a risk was so inspiring to me. And I came home and I couldn't even wipe the smile off my face. I felt so energized. And then I went to work, the next Monday to school, and walking in, it was hilarious because I vividly remember walking in and walking past my friends in the hall, hey, how's it going? And I have this new energy and I'm so excited. And they're like, living the dream, another day, another dollar, those sayings we've all heard along the way. And it was my line in the sand. I was like, I can't. I would rather be surrounded by that positive energy that's just so full of life and excitement than, living the next 10, 15 years of my life in an environment where everybody's just kind of getting by. And I don't blame, I love all of my teacher friends and I don't blame them. I'm very grateful I have the opportunity to start my business, but it was a great lesson for me to learn who do I want to be surrounded by in the next season of my life. And it's definitely the women who are chasing dreams and, waking up every morning with so much excitement to tackle today. And that is what I wanted.
That's an incredible contrast to have. I think it would change anybody. But it also brings up a really interesting point that I think is kind of societal in scale, and that is that most people really don't want to change. Or they don't want to look too deeply at any roots of dissatisfaction. Why is that? It's one of the things that really puzzles me.
I personally think that we choose comfort over passion. I think that when things are comfortable and you're, nothing real big is going wrong in your life, it's like you don't want to rock the boat because the unknown in taking risks is so unsettling. Even just for me, the huge change of leaving a job I had been in. And I had never even imagined when I started teaching, I just thought this is what I would do for my whole career. And so that's what I think a lot of teachers also think. And so doing anything different was a huge risk. You're leaving this stable job. And I didn't know if my business would flop or if it would be successful, if it would take 6 months to get off the ground or it would take 5 years to get off the ground. And so I think sometimes just taking risks is so scary because there's so many unknowns. And I also think that who we surround ourselves by can sometimes be as important, because if you're surrounded by people who aren't taking risks, who are just showing up for their jobs and are just living their life and doing the same old, and not in a negative way, just like they're just content with, the day in and day out of the same things, then I don't think you're overly inspired. But I think for me, going to this women's conference, being around all of these women who are like, I'm starting my business. It's scary. It's hard, but it, feeds my soul and I want to work. And I feel so much purpose in this. And so that just reminded me that that is okay. And that is an option out there. And so I think sometimes making change, just that risk, is what you believe about yourself and kind of who you surround yourself by.
I think who you surround yourself with is really important. I mean, I personally have kind of a rule that I don't let negative energy into my life. Anybody can have a bad day, but if you're coming out with consistently negative energy, you are gone because it does influence you. And I think that if you look at, say, the 5 people around you and you average them out, you want them to average up, not down.
Right. And I think that in that same season where my life was just going by, we had great friends. We still have amazing friends, but I realized how important it is to almost make my circle smaller and surround myself by people who, like you said, are just positive people who feed my soul, who let me be myself, who don't judge me. And, even in our difficult season, we were really intentional about who we put in our life in the day-to-day during that season. Because as you can imagine, you've been through your own very difficult seasons, having that negative energy when you're already going through something challenging, it can be like it's like the crabs in the bucket, right? They just pull you down. Where I needed people who were inspiring and positive and encouraging and loving and like unconditionally there for me no matter what. And so I've taken those lessons with me, even, into 5 years later. We ended up moving to a neighborhood after living in our same house for 16 years. And even just meeting new neighbors and friends. And I've been very intentional of not just plugging people into my life to feel a sense of belonging, but being really intentional about, like you said, are these people positive? Do they add to my life and not, take from the little bit of energy I have after, working and my family to put out there?
Well, and do I connect with them? I know I'm really lucky. I get to have meaningful conversations with people every week. And I look for that actually in my private life too. I like a conversation with some meaning, not, the usual fluff that surrounds us in life. And the fluff is okay, it's cool. But I really like finding people who have a little more depth than that.
I agree. It's actually interesting. I live in Colorado. I grew up here. Um, I have a lot of people that have been in my life for a very long time here. And when we moved up, we moved a little bit north of where we lived. And so it was kind of like a fresh start for me. And I ended up becoming a part of a little crew of women. And it's interesting. We do real life together. And we talk almost every day. We use Marco Polo because life is busy. And so it's a lot of times just through the Marco Polo app, but we do the good, the bad, the ugly. We show up in the morning with buns on our heads and no makeup on. And it has been so transformational for me in friendship to realize that I don't want to be a part of a crowd that is maybe more of the majority just because I want to be a part of a small group who I can be myself around. And also it kind of sets me up. So for when I go through the next bump in my life, which will happen, I already have this, tribe of women that I can fall back on who will be there for me no matter what. And I can just show up exactly how I am versus, like you said, so many relationships and friendships, I think can be a little bit surfacey, but those aren't the people that are going to get you through the hard seasons. And I really believe more than ever in the importance of having people to do life with. I know a lot of people who are so private, and it makes me kind of sad, and it is, to each their own. But I don't know how I would have gotten through some of these seasons, whether it was having, newborn twins who were preemies and sick, without our tribe of people. And I don't know how I would have gotten through my hard season at 40 without a tribe. So I think more than anything, just remembering how important it is to surround yourself with people who will help you when you really need them the most, that you can call at 2 a.m. if you have to, versus, the soccer mom you think is your best friend down the street, but you couldn't call them if you needed, them to pick up your kid from school. You would never even think of it. So I enjoy taking that lesson with me as I move forward in my life.
I think finding one's authentic tribe, and it may change over time, but I think that's really essential. But why? It's hard, or I think it can be hard. Why is that?
I think it's scary to let people know, all the things. I think it's hard to be transparent. I think that, especially with social media, the catchphrase, it's everybody's highlight reel or whatever. I think a lot of times in this day and age, we live our lives by showing our highlight reels. So when you're having a bad day or you're struggling, I love my kids more than life itself. My teenage 14-year-old, almost 14-year-old twins have put us in a little bit of a challenging season right now. If you've raised kids, teenager life is not always easy. And so I think that having, friends that I can tell them I'm having a hard day and I feel like an awful mom. I sent them out the door and I was yelling at them. I'm not living my highlight reel with them. I'm telling them this was an ugly morning and I'm really glad they're going to come home from school later so I can show up differently is so important to be able to even just process that out loud with people instead of trying to keep it all in and just show up so it looks great on the outside. But it requires vulnerability and it requires being transparent and trusting the people you're telling are going to not use that information against you, whether it's judging you or gossiping about it or whatever it is. And so I also think sometimes people struggle with vulnerability and you have to go first. Like I have one or two of my new friends up in our new neighborhood weren't big sharers. And then the more that time's gone by and the rest of us have shared, now they've become big sharers because I think it took them time to start trusting that we have a safe container where we can all, share our stories and it will stay between us. And so I think that's another piece that people, why people maybe don't have that tribe, because it takes time and effort to create that space and those relationships.
I think kind of looking at your story overall, I think so many women in their around 40 or so find themselves in such a similar situation. The world, their lives are just nuts, and there's no time for them at all. What advice would you give them?
I would say you should definitely get out of your comfort zone, and it requires risks. But I think sometimes projecting what you want to show up as when you're 50, even fast forward 10 years from where you are right now, do you want to be doing the exact same thing you're doing now? And if your answer is no, then you have to start taking some risks and getting out of your comfort zone. And I think not waiting until A, B, or C happens, until my kids graduate, until this, until that, because I think we're not guaranteed time and health. And so if you're healthy and, you're in a good place, or maybe you're not in a good place, but taking risks right now will be the only way you're going to see something different 10 years from now. Because, even for me, after I had kids, I think so many of us, it's not just like a few months pass. It's like years or even a decade passes and you're, get to a point where you're like, how did I get here? And I think the only way to not repeat the same thing is to really reflect. I'm a big journaler. I'm a big podcast listener. Listen to other people's stories, get inspiration, journal, take time to take care of yourself, find out what really makes you passionate or what you're passionate about, and start finding little ways you can start adding that into your life. And maybe it will be a business, or maybe it will be joining a group that, you can go knit, or maybe it's just something small, but even just taking baby steps toward a different life is going to require you to take risks and get out of your comfort zone. And you can't keep putting it off because you just never know.
And you never know what good things might come from getting out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely. I look back all of the time and I still see all my old teacher friends. And when we get together, it's like, I've been out of teaching in the classroom for 5 years now, and I guess not 5, let's see, almost 4. And if I wouldn't have taken those steps, which were very scary, I would be doing the exact same thing. And it would not be bringing me the joy I have now in my life. Between, in my family, we are definitely happier than we've ever been in our marriage. We, are very intentional. We have great friends, a small group of friends, but great friends. And more than anything in my career, I absolutely love my job. I leave my job exactly the way I left that women's conference. I flew home just giddy with excitement. Every time I leave, I taught a class yesterday. The whole way home, it was like, I couldn't wait to get home to tell my family about how amazing the class was. And so I want to have that feeling every single day. And that is definitely something I wasn't guaranteed, and I was a little nervous, but if I wouldn't have taken those risks, I wouldn't be here today. So
thank you for listening. I hope you'll support this podcast by becoming a Bump 2 subscriber. Buy us a cup of coffee. It's your support that makes this podcast and website possible. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life.